Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Her Power Podcast, a space created to educate, elevate, and empower young women in every role and season of life. My name is Sydney Ward, Miss Fall Fest Volunteer 2026, and I am also the founder of the Rise and Reclaim Project, which is an initiative I started to help young women build confidence, recognize their worth, and realize the power they already carry within. For each episode of this podcast, we will be sitting down with a variety of female leaders, athletes, title holders, and change makers in our community to take a look at what empowerment and confidence truly looks like in each of their roles. Because we believe that when women rise, they don't just grow, but they reclaim who they were always meant to be. So let's go ahead and introduce this week's guest and get right into the episode. Dr. Meredith Ray is an associate professor and program coordinator in the Division of Epidemiology, Biostatistics, and Environmental Health at the University of Memphis. With a PhD in biostatistics from the University of South Carolina and MPH from the University of Georgia, her work bridges advanced statistical methodology and real-world public health impact. Her research focuses on high-dimensional data analysis, influenced with applications in critical health areas such as lung cancer, sickle cell disease, and HIV. Through her work, Dr. Ray has contributed to research that has influenced clinical guidelines and improved patient outcomes on a global scale. Beyond her research, Dr. Ray is a dedicated mentor and educator, passionate about guiding the next generation of public health professionals. Her work reflects a powerful blend of analytical thinking, curiosity, and a commitment to making a meaningful difference in public health. Please welcome our guest for today, Dr. Meredith Ray.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm definitely excited to have you on because a lot of the people we've had on so far have been athletes or other title holders. So it's kind of going to be nice to get a different perspective and definitely from the academic perspective as well. And for those of you who are listening, you might be wondering how I know Dr. Ray. I am currently getting my MPH at the University of Memphis with a concentration in biostatistics. So I actually took a class last semester and Dr. Ray taught it. So that is how we were introduced to each other. So before we get into your work, I'd like to just start with kind of who you are outside of being a professor and a researcher. So what are some things that you enjoy doing when you're not working in the academic space?
Let's see. I think the first thing is, as I love my dog. I have a 100-pound lab who thinks he's a lap dog. So we do a lot of doggy play dates, do a lot of, walks with him. I've recently got married, so that's been nice to enjoy having a life with a partner, and he's great. But I would say, the older you get, your time becomes more and more limited. So I'd say when I was younger, it's funny you speak of athletes. I am a former athlete. I played basketball, softball all the way through college. So I'd say in my younger days, I like to do intramurals and like co-ed, slow pitch softball. Used to do CrossFit, that kind of stuff. And now the older I've gotten, the body is slowing down and breaking ever so slowly. I think the biggest thing is I just enjoy being active. I really like to do, I did it 1 or 2 triathlons. I like to always St. Jude, I like to run, like to work out, like to just be active in general. Hikes, traveling. I love to travel. So luckily with work, sometimes I get to go to international conferences about once a year. And so that's really nice. I try to like tack on a little bit of trip while I'm doing it. Or I've kind of lived in different states. And so I've kind of have friends all over the US. So I try at least a couple times a year to go and visit friends in different cities. I would say just generally kind of being active, traveling, enjoying the cities I'm in, whether that be Memphis or wherever. I also love my family. I'm very close to my family, but unfortunately they are all back in Georgia where I'm from. So, getting to see them is always a blessing. So I'll try to go and see my niece and nephew and see family when I can during the holidays. And then by the time the year is over, I've been very busy and it's gone.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's cool that I know a couple of the professors have told me too that they get to travel a lot with work and they've gone to some really cool places. So that's really cool that it gets to take you all over the world too.
Yeah, it's really nice.
So tell us a little bit about your journey into public health and kind of what led you to biostatistics, because a lot of people, I'm sure you get this question a lot. A lot of people ask me when they read it, they're like, what the heck is that?
What is that?
And
Yeah.
what moment did you realize that you had that passion?
I'm already laughing because when I tell this story, it's kind of very convoluted, kind of how I got here, but I'm very happy to be here. So I was a math major in undergrad. I went into college kind of being undecided, but just knowing, math was something that always I enjoyed. I would say it came easy, but it made sense. 2 + 2 was 4. So I always enjoyed math growing up, and I always really liked science. So I went to undergrad and was in calculus, and it turned out my calculus teacher was also my academic advisor, and he was like, "Hey, you do well in calculus. Why don't you be a math major?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" So I was a math major, and at the time, I actually thought I was going to do actuarial science. And so therefore, I actually have a minor in business. I'm like 1 or 2 degree or classes away from actually being a double major in business and math. And then my senior year rolled around, and it was time to start applying for grad schools. And I kind of did a little bit of background more into actuarial science, and I was like, maybe not for me. And ironically, I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. I'm from a family of teachers. My mom taught middle and elementary school, and my sister currently still teaches second grade. So I got to witness how much teachers are underappreciated and how much they do behind the scenes, especially with like young generation. Very supportive of our teachers, especially elementary, middle, and high school. And so I was like, oh, I don't want to teach. And so I honestly just Googled. I was like, masters in mathematics, like what is out there other than teaching? Because that's all I knew. I did not come from a family of a research background. Both my parents have their masters, but again, my mom's in education. My dad was in accounting and finance. So, definitely degrees that are not research related at all. And so didn't know what a graduate assistantship was, had no idea any of that existed. So I Googled Master of Mathematics and stumbled upon biostat. And as Google told me then, it was essentially a combination kind of math and statistics catered to public health. So basically it was, biology involved. And I was like, oh, this sounds right up my alley. I've always done well in biology. I love biology and chemistry, did well in those classes, and I obviously like math. So I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. So I then, again, Google your best friend, just Google to see what universities in Georgia had biostat, and that's kind of where then I realized most of them were kind of nestled within public health, and got into the University of Georgia, went there for my master's. So that's where the MPH plays a role with the concentration in biostat, and ended up loving it. I think my first biostat class was a little bit of a shock because I'm so used to your math classes, they're not necessarily applied. It's just very like you're learning calculus, you're learning the math behind it, but you don't really ever know when to apply. I remember thinking linear algebra, I'm like, and differential equations, like this is cool, but I have no idea when I'm actually using this in the real world. So it finally began to kind of bridge that gap of the theoretical part and then when to apply it, and then most importantly is like how to interpret it. So got in there, loved it, and then also got my first exposure, got my first GA-ship. It was actually in environmental health of PBPK modeling, and that opened the world of research. And then I really loved it. I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, not only can you get school paid for, but like you get to do research outside of your classes. So I fell in love with it. Never had any inkling of getting my PhD until I really got into this field and the research. And so after my master's, I took a year off and actually did some consulting work with kind of the CDC and with some EPA people I met through that grant I was on as a graduate assistant in my master's. And during that time, I was like, no, I really think I want to go back and get my PhD. Like, I really enjoy the research. I really enjoy this. And I want to know more. Your MPH, you only learn so much of the analytical part. So I was like, I really need more. I'd like more. And so that's when I went on to get my PhD at the University of South Carolina. Again, loved it even more there. Not only did I feel like I got a really great education at South Carolina, I also met some of my closest friends. We're still friends to this day. Of people at South Carolina. I always say South Carolina is a soft spot in my heart. It's my second home. But yeah, I mean, I got a phenomenal education, and it's like I remember taking a specific class. It was with Dr. Hussey. Shout out Dr. Hussey I don't know if he'd ever hear this, but love this professor. He was really, really great at bridging the stat inference and the application. I remember like sitting in that class, it was like a light bulb went off of suddenly every math class I'd ever taken, like somehow they all were connected. I was like, oh, this makes complete sense. So ever since then, I've really enjoyed it. And so then ended up in Memphis. And have been here now for over 10 years. And but I really like it. I think it again, it was kind of a weird steps of how I got there. It definitely was not something I knew even in undergrad that I was like, oh, I'm gonna get my PhD in biostat and start teaching. So it's but I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's super important. I also think biostat, it's collaborative in nature, and I think that's the part I like the best is, or the most, excuse me, is how much it goes hand in hand with epidemiology. And let's say, for example, of all of my applications, so lung cancer, sickle cell, HIV, you're constantly working with clinicians, you're working with other experts. It's very much a group setting, which I kind of like because it lets you get involved with topics that I normally wouldn't be. So, it's like in order for me to analyze the data correctly, appropriately, I need to understand the context. So like every kind of subcategory you do, you kind of get immersed in this little bubble of sickle cell and understand the biology of it. And same thing with lung cancer, understanding, okay, what are the steps? How does the operating room play a role? How does the surgeon play a role? How does the institution play a role? What are the guidelines? So I have thoroughly loved getting in biostat. I think that's part of it too, is the math. To me, you get to use it to answer a question. And also the best part is, especially if you're doing the analysis and not being the mentor, like you get to see the results first. Like you're like the first one who gets to see the answer to the question. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, so I have thoroughly enjoyed ever since, again, I might have got here kind of in a wonky way, but I love it. I have a passion for it. I get excited about it still. I love talking again. I think the collaboration and talking and meeting people through, biostat is also really fun for me.
Yeah, I would definitely say that is something that drew me to it as well. Is just I like the collaborative approach as well, and how much interplay there is there in the biostats field. And it is interesting learning how everybody gets into it, because I feel like it's kind of a bit of a hidden field. A lot of people don't really know about it, but it
Yes.
is really important
Yeah.
work. So what
I agree.
does
So also, if anyone's listening, if you want to go into biostatistics, let me know.
yes, we're recruiting people for biostats. So what does your typical day look like for you as a professor and a researcher?
I love that question because I have had definitely my friends will be like, okay, what do you do again? Like, okay, so what did you do today? I would say that's kind of the best part is there's rarely any 2 days that look the same. So as I would say is in academia, your job is, we always say it's broken up kind of into three parts. You have service, you have teaching, and you've got research. So I teach, like this semester, for example, I teach two classes. They're in person, and we teach, most of our classes are at night, as you know. So I teach Tuesday, Thursday nights, 5:30 to 8:30. So typically Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, I'm preparing for class. That might look a little different depending on if I've taught the class before. For example, this semester I'm teaching R in public health, which R is for everyone who's listening doesn't know, it's a statistical software system. And not system, but statistical software. And so because it's really the first time we're teaching this class in a semester setting, the effort it takes and the amount of time it takes to get a class going is very time consuming. And so therefore, typically Tuesdays, that's my R class, I'm spending all day prepping for class, making sure my slides and or my R coding is correct, finding examples, preparing the homework. So typically Tuesdays are going to be dedicated to the class for R. Thursdays, I teach advanced survival. So survival is time to event analysis. And so I've taught that class a couple times, but each year I kind of like to revamp, especially if I'm not having to record. As you know, Biostat 1's a little bit harder if you're kind of teaching two classes at once, online and in person. I like to keep them the same, but for survival, it's in person only. So I like to each year tweak the slides and retweak the examples. If I feel like last year's cohort didn't pick up on a topic as clearly or as cleanly as I'd like, I might revamp it. So typically Thursday, same thing. The afternoons, I'm focusing on my teaching and courses and homework and things like that. Also, grading is in there as well. So I try then to leave Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays for doing research and or other service. So I'm also biostatistics program coordinator, and that kind of covers, tracking students. That includes overseeing admission processes. So right now we're in the middle of looking at PhD applications, and everything that might look at, curriculum reviews, all of that. So that kind of gets scattered in. And then not to mention, traditionally, when you're dealing with research is kind of, especially as an analyst, you have time where you're actually doing the actual analysis, and then you've got times where you're typically meeting with your team and presenting those results, presenting your analysis, or just if you've got questions for the team, that's happening. So typically each week there are standing meetings with people you're working with and collaborators, either weekly or bi-weekly is kind of the typical thing. So on average, there might be about 10 hours worth of standing meetings a week, meeting with collaborators, and then also another set of hours where you're actually trying to get the analysis done. And then in addition to that, let's say I've got my PhD students. So with biostat, their PhD tends to have a novelty of methodology involved, which again, methodology, if you're having it novel, it can typically take time, especially if they're having to code it. So traditionally, I also like to meet with my PhD students or my master's thesis students every week. So kind of scattered in that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's also standing meetings, not only with my collaborators, but with my students as well. And then leftover time, whatever that might be on Saturday, might be Sunday. You're also then doing the actual research that has to get done. And that research can involve not only perform the analysis, writing up your results, but then you also want to disseminate those results. So that's typically in the form of manuscripts, so peer-reviewed published papers, presentations, conference presentations, anything of that sort. So it's kind of, I always say my day-to-day will vary, but in general, it's kind of how I structure more of my weeks. And again, of that, I always say you've got fires that pop up every day that might suddenly, I might plan to do X, Y, and Z today, and then things happen. Now you're doing A, B, C, X, then back to C, and then back to Z. But in general, it's kind of how my days, if you will, look. So there's some consistency, but at the same time, every day looks kind of different depending on what your deliverables are, what due dates are. You kind of have to shift your priorities on occasion where, let's say we have a deadline for a conference coming up. I'm gonna have to put this work on pause and jump to this. So the day-to-day is kind of unique, but again, that's kind of what the general week, I would say, looks like.
That's really cool. I kind of like that it's not the same every day. It's kind of nice.
Yes, me too. I'm definitely not built, I don't think, to walk in monotonously and do 9 to 5 every day. So it's very flexible. It's really deadline. I feel like you've just got to get things done. So they're going to have some weeks where you feel like you're drowning. There's a lot. I mean, that's just part of the job. There's a lot going on. Just like students have deadlines for midterms, as faculty, we also turn on and grade those midterms. So, you're going to have fluctuations across the semester.
Yeah, absolutely. So was there ever a time, whether it be through your journey academically when you were going through your education or even as a professional, when you felt like the work was really overwhelming or really challenging and you felt like maybe you wanted to take a step back and or what kept you motivated about your work still?
Yes, absolutely. I will tell you, I feel like I always wish there was two of me at all times. But yeah, it's, like I was just saying, I don't know if it's just academia, but I would say kind of research in general. I don't want to speak for other fields, but I would think that everything kind of is cyclical, comes in waves. You've got grant deadlines, and grant deadlines are pretty similar across the year. They're typically around March, June, and October. And then again, we've got knowing deadlines for our program of PhD, comp exams, midterms, finals. So you already know there's certain times of the year where you're like, I'm going to be really busy. I would assume kind of like accountants when you have tax deadlines, you're like, all right, this is our, these 3 months I'm going to be drowning. But then the rest of it, you're like, okay, as long as I can get to this, I can get through it. So absolutely. There are days I feel like I'm not quite fully drowning, but just the tip of my mouth and my nose above water. And then you've got other days where you're like, oh, I can take a breather. Maybe I could go for a walk at lunch, or go for a run at lunchtime and take a break. So absolutely. I feel like it's cyclical throughout the semester, throughout the year. you're going to have weeks where you're working 12-hour days. Again, you're working on the weekends. And then you got other weeks where you're like, okay, this is manageable. So for me personally, I have had to learn what works for me best is to put boundaries and also to make sure that I stay healthy outside of work. So I feel like for me personally, working out, being active keeps my stress in check. Also setting boundaries of, I don't know about everyone else, but I personally, I've known that if I start checking my emails after like 8 p.m. and all of a sudden I'll feel my stress ramp up, I'm not sleeping. And if I don't sleep, I get very cranky and like my brain, I'm old now, my brain starts to short circuit. So I've set boundaries where like I won't check my email after 8 p.m. I won't look at my phone before 9 a.m. I mean, unless I know now, again, that's obviously with caveats. You know, if you know that you've got a deadline at midnight and you're actively working on something different story. But typically I'd like to set boundaries with work. It just keeps me in a better mental headspace. And I go to the gym every morning before work, and I refuse to look at my email before the gym because I know if I look at it, all of a sudden I'm going to be like, oh, someone emailed me. I know I need to respond. I need to, go work. And that anxiety will be like, oh, I have so much to do. So I've learned that balancing, work and life is really important, at least for me. I feel like as much as I love my job, my personal philosophy is there's more to life than just work. As much as I love my work and I think it's important, and I think public health is very important, but I'm like, you still want to have a life outside of it. So I try really hard to keep a balance, even when I'm stressed, to do small things. Again, even if it's just like, well, I made the gym today this morning before I went into work, at least I've got that going. So, yeah, I think for me, it's putting boundaries on work and personal life, staying active, and trying to balance the stress is kind of my key. At least that's what works for me, is balancing the stress. Obviously, again, some weekends, if the work has to get done, you're going to be working all weekend. That is what it is. But, in general, I try to keep a balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always tell people, because a lot of people will sometimes ask me like, how do you do everything? You're in school and you're doing, work and everything. And I just always tell people, like, keep the things that you like to do outside of, no matter how busy you are,
Yep.
keep the things that keep you grounded outside of that, and then that really helps your stress levels.
Yeah, 100%.
So with the growing presence of AI in public health, and also for some of you who may not know, public health is also often very influenced by policy and politics as well. What challenges have you encountered in that way, and how do you continue to adapt and stay motivated in an evolving field?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, it's still a learning process, like as we speak. AI itself is brand new. So, faculty, students, we all are in this together of novelty of what is it, how it works. I mean, every single day you've got new things coming out. So I look at AI as, I feel like it can be both a blessing and a curse at the same time, right? So on one hand, I look at AI as can be really beneficial. One, it does a great job of if you need additional clarification for a topic outside of what your professor, is presenting, or even myself, let's say I'm looking into a new methodology, it can act as a really great search engine. It can pull, resources together to make it really comprehensive, to summarize it, do research, lit reviews, all of that. I also think it can be great with helping with coding. There's a lot of positives to it. However, I do always worry when it comes to the teaching side is where it's a really tough, it can be a burden in the sense of, let's say, for example, I'm teaching an art class right now. Well, I'm very aware it's software and it's coding. So yes, you could just take my homework, plug it in to AI, even though students, please don't do this. I hope you're not doing it. But you could easily just plug it in and get the answers. But I look at it as like the purpose of school is to teach you. I don't want, yes, AI can go do it for you, but one, you don't know if AI is always correct, and two, because it still makes mistakes, and two, like, you're not learning it. Yes, you can pass your class and get an A, but you walk out and you can't tell me what you just did throughout the semester. Like, to me, that's a giant red flag of basically we're dumbing down our future world, and being very dependent on it. So, I will say I can tell there's an uptick in usage, not only just like within the classroom, but like even just basic emails and communications. I can't tell you when students will email me and I can tell they literally had AI write their email to me. And I'm like, you can't even type your own email, like just to ask a question for class, because they'll copy and paste and leave the prompts at the bottom, or they'll leave the hashtags in there where it's like insert your name here. And that's scary to me, that I'm like, you can't even email me your own question in your own terms. You've got to use AI. So, it's times like that that make me very nervous, and I'm very concerned of going forward if people are using it as a crutch and not actually learning. But I feel like it's really, really cool and really awesome and great tool to use to assist you. So there's a balance there, and I'm not quite sure. And that's not just me. I think that's across everywhere. I think that's academia, that's corporate. There's gray areas of where it becomes helpful, gets into now it's doing it for you, and we don't want to completely depend on it. So it's a balance. And it's especially moving forward of it's a constant discussion of, even currently, behind the scenes, we had a division meeting, faculty meeting a couple weeks ago of what does this look like? What are issues we're seeing? So it is a literal real time. Sorry if you hear breathing backgrounds of my dog. I'm not panting if people can only hear this. But it's a current, we're working on it and seeing what it looks like actively. What does it look like for online classes? What does it look like for in person? How do we use it? How do we not use it? Because it's like if it's going to be out there, might as well incorporate it into our work and our teaching. So it's a blessing and a curse, I'd say, at both times. I think we should be responsible in how we use it, and I hope students, all it takes is someone asking you a question. If you don't have AI, I'm like, well, then how do you even know to interpret the AI? How do you know that it's right? So, that critical thinking, I think, is still very much needed. So yeah, well, we will see where the future takes us. Right now it's kind of up in the air, but we're all trying, just along with students, we're all learning.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely am kind of in the same boat because I think there's a lot of good things that it can bring, and then at the same time, it's still very new. So understanding, and something I learned as a student is, I will say myself, I sometimes use AI to, like you said,
Yeah.
understand further topics and stuff like that. But something I noticed actually during undergrad, I was taking, or no, it might have been last semester, honestly, when I was taking your class and we were doing coding. Sometimes I would use AI just to like confirm what I was
Oh
doing.
yeah, to
And I
help.
would
Yep.
notice, I was saying, I even turned to like my boyfriend on the couch. I was like, this is just wrong. Like, I'm looking at it
Hmm.
and it's fully wrong. It's not even giving me the right answer. And I
Yep.
think a lot of students don't sometimes recognize like AI is still very new. And so some things it still doesn't know how to do properly. And so you're just trusting that
100%.
the answer is right without checking that is right.
Yeah, I took an AI workshop last semester, myself and a few other faculty, and it was just, I forget the title, but something like advanced data analysis with AI, and it was just a basic, like, showing how you can use just Chat GPT for typical, not like linear regression and multivariable linear regression. And even in that workshop of running through, like, watching the instructor go through it, we all were getting different results. Even basic, from like copying from the results and putting it to a table, it was transposing values, it was getting other values. So yeah, it's still it still is not flawless. So I always say, like, I completely agree. Like, there's times with R, I'm like, I know how to do this. I have the general syntax, tweak it here and there. So it is very helpful, but again, it's not the end all be all, completely run it. It's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, what is one thing, or what's the most exciting or rewarding project that you think you've probably ever worked on? I know that's probably a big question, but.
Oh, that is tough, because that's hard to answer, because I think, because I do applied work in such different fields, I think they're all, it's hard to pinpoint one, because it's like, oh, this field wasn't impactful. I would say, oh, that's tough. I would say the lung cancer, I think, because I've just been in it the longest. I've been in that work now. Dr. Smeltzer, Dr. Matt Smeltzer, he's associate professor in epi at the School of Public Health. he kind of brought me on in the lung cancer realm. And so again, I've been in that now for about 10 years. And I think that one, just because I've been in it the longest, has been the most impactful for me, because I've gotten to see it's very much in a clinical setting. So we work with a local hospital here, and looking at improving quality lung cancer resections and improving nodal staging. And therefore, if you can improve, the surgery quality and nodal staging, you can get better outcomes. And so, more appropriate treatment, better outcomes, all that kind of stuff. And so I would say that one, as a whole, I think has been probably the most impactful, just because I've gotten to see the implications of our research. So some of our very first, at least from my first, in terms of when I got brought on, our focus a little bit more on the surgical quality resection. And so I've gotten to go now to each year some of the international conferences I get to go to. So it's been really interesting getting to see our work cited, across the world, and global impact of like, oh, well, we're leading the field and improving our database is one of the most detailed and largest in the world. And so, getting to show the results of what our cohort is showing, I think has been really cool to see people citing it, and getting to see like, oh, well, even though you think you're doing a quality resection, if you look at your data, maybe you really aren't. So I would say that lung cancer as a whole has been probably the most impactful, just because I've gotten to see the results. As opposed to HIV and sickle cell, I'm a little bit newer into those fields. So I've not quite gotten to see the impact of kind of what we're doing as opposed to the lung cancer. But methodology, I would say the one that I thought was the coolest is, so kind of as you briefly mentioned, let me back up for a second. So with biostat, my research is kind of twofold. So as a biostatistician, one, people typically, I don't say hire us, but ask for our help to analyze their data. The second half of a biostat is really looking at novel methodology. So for example, I got a grant several years ago, and I essentially created a novel algorithm that would cluster gene expression, methylation, and SNP, so basically genetic and epigenetic data, because the data is unique in the fact that it's mixed. You've got continuous and categorical data, and that, without getting too much into the weeds, the data structure is unique, because you've got specific methylation and CPG sites are on certain genes, and they kind of talk to other genes, and basically if they're methylated in different SNPs, they can affect how the gene expresses itself, and therefore how it performs. So it's unique in this, like the actual structure of the data and the type of data. To cluster it, there were no existing methodologies at the time when I did this. And so I created what I call the VIP algorithm. So that I think has been really exciting to get to see, and not only myself, but then now my students, we've looked at variations of it, and added covariates and added repeated measures, all that kind of fun stuff. So I think that's been really cool, is to get to cluster genetic and epigenetic data, especially it kind of is correlating with the field, because 15 years ago, we were just fairly 20, I'd say 15, 20 years, we're fairly somewhat new into the field of being able to even measure the genome of methylation and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really cool to look at that project, and it's kind of its offsprings, if you will. So that one's been exciting. And then the other one I really enjoyed was a collaboration with the life sciences, where we have, I don't know if you know, that we live kind of in an earthquake zone. So it's called the New Madrid seismic zone. Yes. And so I worked with one of the professors, he's now retired, but they had just basic earthquake data that was spatial. And so I like to cluster if you can't tell, I'm finding patterns. So clustered that data over 10 years to identify different epicenters where some earthquakes, their epicenters aren't changing, like meaning longitudinally, latitudinally, and then others you can see where they're shifting. So basically we looked at all the New Madrid seismic zone and clustered it to see different patterns within the zone. And that was really cool. That one, I think, was just because there's a nerd side of me that also loves, not necessarily love earthquakes, but I think they're fascinating because they're very damaging. So that sounds very odd to say I love it. But in studying, their geology, I guess you should say. Oh, that's right. But yeah, so that was really cool.
Yeah, I actually have recently kind of gotten, because I have like a weird thing for like natural disasters too. I think they're kind of
Yes.
cool. And so I like that the field of biostats can kind of lead you to, if you want to work more with clinical and you want to see those kind of outcomes, you can. But then, like you said, you can do something in life sciences and see that side of it. So I think that's really cool, the diversity in what you can do with that research.
Yeah. That's why I always say, I tell my students, like, even though biostat, we cater, like the methods and approaches we teach, they cater to public health, but they're absolutely applicable to other fields. I always say, like, math is still math, whether you're applying it to, business, economics. But I mean, again, there's caveats to, like, how we build our models might be slightly different, but they're all still relatively applicable to different fields.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit more about your role as a leader and a mentor. So, as a professor, what do you hope that your students take away from your classes beyond just the material that you're teaching?
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting question. So I always say, one, I hope that I just want them to learn, um, or at least like learn how to learn, if that makes sense. I teach, primarily right now, biostat one, advanced survival. So the classes I teach are fairly technical. So, it's not like a social behavior sciences where there are concepts taught, but also kind of subjectivity of like how you approach it. And forgive me, SBS, if I am butchering that interpretation. But the class is interesting because it's very quantitative. So I feel like the class is fairly objective. We try to take out all subjectivity when it comes to analysis, right? I always said we don't, test everything. We have that, significance level. It's either significant or it's not at 0.05. So on one hand, I always say, I try to remove all subjectivity out of actually how I teach. But at the end of the day, I tell my students, at the end of the day, you're maybe not going to be a biostatistician, but at least I want you to have a general understanding of the material because you're going to see it at some point, whether it be, you're reading a journal article and you're going to see a p-value, understand what that means, whether you're going to see it as your thesis, your master's project, your PhD, you know, in a world where data is growing and, you're going to see a lot more analysis happening, and within policy, right? That's going to drive policy. So, it's nice to understand, okay, well, if there's a policy coming out, what was the evidence or body of evidence that it's based on? And to understand, like, what, if you could read that, understand that. So I think that's my biggest takeaway is I just want them to learn and also to understand how to learn. Like you know this about me. I've always said, like, my philosophy is just because I was a math major and there are going to be some teachers, for whatever reason, y'all just aren't on the same page. I can say the color is blue and you're going to be like, I don't understand it. Someone else says blue is the color. Oh, that makes sense. And just by nature, we're all different. We think different. So I'm very much understand that how I teach and how my brain thinks and how I deliver material may not be optimum for every single person. That's why I've always said I don't mind y'all talking with your, go talk with your classmates. Go use chat and Google to help you get additional examples or material. I don't want you cheating, but like I don't mind trying to find, connect the dots with different perspectives as long as you're understanding the perspective at the end of the day. So I think that's kind of where I want is to understand that you're not alone in doing the analysis. Yes, and writing up your homework and testing. Yes, that should be all you. But and learning, understanding that like use your collaborators, use the other tools at hand. Don't sit by yourself in a world of not understanding. Talk to people. We're in a world of humans. So I think it's one just understanding the concepts. Takeaway doesn't mean you have to be a biostatistician and that you're running every analysis, but general takeaways and also just learning how to learn and collaborate. Like talk with your peers, talk with your collaborators, talk with everyone, make those connections because also you never know where they might lead. Could be friendships, could be working partnerships. I'd say that's my takeaways.
Yeah, I like that. So, talking a little bit more about collaboration, kind of into that. How important has mentorship been in your career, and how do you strive to empower the next generation? And kind of how do you believe that, do you think mentorship and empowerment are an important qualities for this field?
Oh, 100%. I have a wonderful mentor. She wears many different hats in my life. So her name is Dr. Hung Mei Zong. She is my division director, as well as my mentor, as well as I've known her since 2010. So she's been my mentor, not only just official capacity, but unofficial capacity. I think the world of her. I think very highly of her. She is always someone I strive to be, not only of how she mentors, but I always am like, Hung Mei, I don't know how you get it all done. She's very bright, but also very patient, very she'll push you when you need to be pushed, but she has never been rude. She's never been hurtful. She has a really good way of being like, hey, you need to get this done. And because like you strive to want to there's a please her of like, oh yes, ma'am, I'll do it. So I've had a wonderful mentor. And because of that, especially coming, I think, from my background, not being from an environment where research, knowing what research was, knowing even when you're applying for jobs, what your CV needs to look like, how, what is the kosher behavior of thanking someone after all, just small things like that you maybe wouldn't know. She's always been wonderful of kind of been a guiding light, both for, again, she wears many different hats for me. So both as an academic mentor, a personal mentor, it's been wonderful to have her, and she's obviously very successful. So I'm like, let me just do what Hung Mei does. But I think it's very helpful because I feel like, and this is a empowerment in me, I kind of make that synonymous with confidence. And I feel like in order for someone to get there, you have to have confidence in yourself. And I feel like you're never going to have that confidence until you practice, until you get out and do it over and over and over again. And you're going to make mistakes, but redo it. And I think maybe that goes back to playing sports. It's like, these people, you're not going to be a Major League Baseball pitcher and they want the ball. I want to go pitch. They have confidence in themselves because they've also thrown 500 pitches a day for every day of their life for 20 years. They're confident. They know their abilities. They know what they can and can't do. And same thing, even in my field. I remember there's always you hear imposter syndrome. I mean, there's always that little bit of, especially when I came out of my master's, even leaving my PhD, it was still like, enough to know how much you don't know. There's plenty of fields that I'm like, oh, I didn't take a class in that. I don't know that. So, I think one is being aware of what you know, and also knowing what's out there, like knowing that I'm going to need to still learn after my formal education, but also just practice. I think that's the biggest comment even students will say is like, I have finished my MPH or my PhD and I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, of course, because you've not gotten to practice it yet. You've just learned 15 classes. So you've learned 15, topics, if you will, and subjects, but like you've not had, 5 or 6 projects in every single class. You don't have the time for that. It's like, but when you get into your real job, I promise you can refer back to your notes, things that we talk about, like it'll make more sense when you kind of get immersed into it. So I always say to me, the empowerment and mentorship goes hand in hand with practice. Get out there. It's the empowerment and confidence will come with time and with practice and exposure. Mentoring is, I think, really helpful to have someone also keep you on track and also tell you their experience. And you might have more than one mentor. That might not look the exact same through all versions of your life. That also might also be as, like, I know, for example, starting a job, you've got your boss could be a mentor, but also your colleague who started a year before you could be a mentor, because they can be like, well, here's my experience of having been here. That's still a type of mentorship in my mind. So I think mentorship is extremely important. And then that also kind of breaks into what you need out of mentorship and how you mentor. So I try to take my lived experiences and apply it to my mentorship. And I also will tell students, here's my philosophy. When I mentor, I don't like to micromanage. I don't like to be micromanaged unless it calls for it, which I don't I don't agree with that. But I also realize some people need that. Some people need micromanagement. Some people need macro, management. So I think that's also a part of all the mentorship is communication, expressing what you need, how the other person mentors, all of that. So I always tell my students, like, you're an adult. I'm going to treat you like an adult. We meet once a week, get your stuff done. Now, if you don't get it done, now we're going to change how maybe this mentorship works or how we meet or things like that. But if you're doing it on your own, then I'm going to stick with a macro management style. But if that doesn't seem to work, we'll change it up. Then I'll get more micro-y. But, it's also kind of what you need. And I think the mentorship can look very different. It can be superior, can be a classmate, can be, look. So, and unfortunately, you might have to find your mentor. Just because you walk into a job doesn't mean you're automatically going to have that. I got very lucky and very blessed with Hong Mei and Dr. Zhang, excuse me, but, not everyone has that. So I also feel like my colleagues, like, Matt, Dr. Smeltzer, I think has been seeing how he moves through, his collaborations, things like that. I think also is a way of inspiration and like, oh, I like how he does that. Let me mimic that. So also finding people I think just you like and how they move and how they work and just mimicking kind of what they do, I think also is a type of mentorship in a way.
Yeah, I definitely think the one thing I've liked about studying at the University of Memphis is the different kind of mentorship opportunities and stuff that are available, because that's something for me that got me into the field of biostats to begin with, was a professor just saying like, hey, you seem to really be interested in this, like, would you want to do it further? And definitely having that hands-on practice definitely gives you more confidence to apply what we're learning in class as well.
Yeah.
So how do you, it's kind of easy, I feel like, well, maybe not, I don't know, but it might be easy when you're doing a lot of projects and research to get really wrapped up in it. And so how do you define your self-worth outside of those accomplishments or outside of the success in your career?
That is, I don't know. I mean, I find it similar to maybe an adjustment kind of when I went, again, I played college softball all 4 years of college. And so growing up, my parents always had a rule of thumb of like, you can do sports as long as your grades stay good. The second your grades begin to fail, if they do, you're out of sports immediately. So I think for me, sports and academia went hand in hand. And obviously they taught me all the great, tons of great, what do you call it? Like toolkit to manage time and multitask. So, but it was a shock when I went to get my master's and all of a sudden you're like, I'm not an athlete anymore, but yet. So I think that time was a very weird time of like, oh, I didn't realize how much I think I identified as in my mind, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously of, oh, I mean, I like academia. I still want to do well in academia. I think by nature type A and, you want to do well. So like academics, I still did great in, but I didn't realize how much I think I non-consciously identify like, oh, I'm an athlete, I'm a student athlete. And then when that was gone, I think my master's got really weird of like, oh, who am I? So I think that time in my life that was kind of when I began to be like, okay, now what do there's still a part of you that's like, you're used to striving for something, you're used to doing something. I can't just walk around daily and I got nothing to do. Like, maybe it's the type A or maybe it's, I'm addicted to stress. I don't really know. But, there's something still about you that's like, I've got to have, what am I doing? What am I doing in my life? So I think I kind of transferred that drive or like the deadline, of wanting to be good, wanting to be the best, trying. I think that shifted into academics. And that's kind of, I think, where the research and PhD came from. But I have learned, I think, maybe just with age too, like we were talking earlier, it's as much as I find I love my job and I love what I do, but I'm like, it's not fully me. Like I still very much enjoy seeing my friends. I very much believe in life itself is limited. Time is our most non-renewable resource. And I'm like, I love my work and I love that, but I'm also like, there's I'm still me. Like, I still want to go hang out with my friends, hang out with my dog. I still like things outside of work. I still, like to go do runs. I mean, I'm not very fast, but I still like to go do runs. I still like to do, back in the day, CrossFit competitions. Again, not the best, but something that you strive for. Again, I think I like deadlines, and so I feel like I still enjoy traveling, and there's so much what I enjoy outside of work, even though I love my work. So I think for me, that really happened after realizing I'm no longer an athlete, but really being like, okay, well, you got to sit with yourself now and be like, what do you want out of life? And so I think the job I love, but I also love the opportunities that come with it, like the travel. And then I think there's still a part of me that's like, I've just learned to, like, I still like people, I like my friends, I like my family, I like going out festivals and things like that. So I think it's been I think that time really changed me and then from then on, it's been kind of an easy, oh, well, here's work, here's school, here's this, but there's things outside of it that I enjoy. And so it's keeping that balance to keep me, I think, the self-importance of you're still a human being, and also like you're only on this earth for so long. So do the things you enjoy, even though I love my work, it can be stressful. So do the things you enjoy as well. So I think that's kind of helped.
Yeah, I think so far, every guest I've had on has either been, like I said, athlete or a title holder. And so we've talked a lot about, finding your identity and your worth outside of that, because it is really common as an athlete, especially when you're a competitive athlete, to have that
Yeah,
moment
it's
of like,
shocking.
what
It's
do you
very jarring.
do?
All of a sudden, you're like, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, I just recently, last year, I was a competitive baton twirler my entire life. And so I
Hmm.
retired last year. And I kind of went through the same thing, just finding, okay, I have all this passion and this energy, but like, where does it go now without that? So, like you said, yeah, definitely finding a balance is good, and realizing that you can carry the things from your passions, from what you learned as an athlete or in your job, and take that outside as well, even if you're not an athlete anymore. So, a little bit of advice for the people listening. So, what advice would you give to a young woman today who might be intimidated or feel intimidated by the fields of STEM or public health research? What would you kind of say to encourage her?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm always going to say you can do it. Like, number one, you can do it. Yes, it's scary, but it's doable. Now, like the first steps, I always say take baby steps if you need. Well, I think it depends on their personality. Like some people might need to do baby steps, which might be starting out with something as small as take some, free online courses let's say we're talking biostat. So take some free online classes in algebra and calc. What is it, like Coursera or I know they're out there. It's all the different ones, but maybe start small and just take a few classes, get your confidence up of like, okay, I got through this step. Let me go to the next one. Okay, now I've got calculus. I'm good on that. Let me go to the next step. Okay, now let me maybe enroll either just jump into MPH, or let me now do a certificate. Let me do one or two classes, see what it feels like. Or if you're the type where you just need to jump in the pool and you don't ease your way in, I mean, just start with go sign up for a certificate in MPH. I always say the worst thing that happens is, which I don't think it ever will, but like worst thing that happens is you fail and you're out a couple $1,000s, which is awful. But I mean, worst case is you fail, but you can always try again. There's other than money and time, which are very hard to lose, but worst case is you go in, you see what you're lacking in, try it again. So I always say, I do believe that I wish as a whole, and this is education starting at the very bottom all the way through college, is I do wish I hate that math, at least in my opinion and my perspective and what I have been exposed to, is so many people are scared of math. And I want to be like, and I don't know if I mean, there's several factors as to why. Some I've heard they're like, oh, I had one class and it scared me away, or I had one bad teacher and then I never went back to it. Or I've got some people who are like, oh, I was really good at math, but I just went into biology or went into this, but I've always been good at math. So like I feel like as a whole, as education, I wish we could revamp our math and science. I think a lot more people are probably more adept than they think they are at math. Especially, again, this is not a shot at teachers doing a bad job. This is not that kind of at all. It's just saying as a whole, I wish, and I think that's what we're trying to do. It's where education's going, is we're trying to beef up, our STEM programs and our math. But I always say start small. Worst case, again, start with some free courses online, start small, see where you're at, see where your holes are, see what your weak in, and they're free. So the only thing you're losing is your time. Again, the internet now is a huge, especially now, speaking of AI, start small, see what you know, see what you don't know, and then you can just tiptoe into your master's. But I very much believe you can do it. Yes, yes, some people might be more that just because I think we're all different. Like I struggle, writing is the hardest thing to me. I like numbers because they make sense. So my whole life, English and lit were always, I hated them. But like math and science, I got excited about. I was like, I can do this. So I realized that that's opposite for some people. Some people just are not into math at all, but they are excellent writers. I'm always envious. I've got some friends who are like that. So I always say like, yes, some people it might come easier to, just because innately numbers just make sense in how their brains work, and others they have to work harder, but that doesn't mean you can't still do it. You just might have to work harder, more steps at it, but it's definitely doable. I always say if you put your mind to it, you can do it. Now, some people, it might take them 10 months, others might take them 10 years, but you can still achieve it. Again, not to deter you from doing it, but and I really hope this is not sounding bad. I'm always going to say yes. Anytime my students like, should I get a PhD? I'm like, absolutely. Should I get the MS? Absolutely, because you set your mind to it, you can do it. Yes, again, it might take a few tries, or you might go on the first try, or it might take some effort, but if you want to do it, you can do it. Mm-hmm. I feel like now you put your mind to, you can do it. Again, it's going to take work, but if you're willing to work, you can do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I remember one of my coaches growing up, she told me what that like really famous quote of like, if you shoot for the moon, you land among the stars. And that I've always kind of taken with me kind of in every aspect of life, because I think people underestimate sometimes our own ability, especially, and we think, oh, that's way too much or that's too much. But actually, when you do it and make a goal to make it happen, you'll be surprised on what you can actually do and how much more you can do.
100%. And I always say too is start with the little steps. Like I remember even with sports, or whether it be like even my dissertation, it's like if you look at everything as a whole, like, oh, here's the goal I need to get to, it can be overwhelming. So I'm like, just don't look at it, just put your head down and get the work done. Like start with the small steps, okay? Let me work on my drills. Let me work on this. Let me work on, just go back to my basic algebra. Let me just get this done. Like start with the stepping stones and just do like little goals, sub goals at a time. And then all of a sudden, by the time you look up again, like, oh, I'm halfway done now, or I'm halfway there. So I always say too, don't set a goal, like an overarching goal, but look down and just put your head down and just do the work.
Yeah. So for my last question, and I ask this to every guest, so my platform is called Rise and Reclaim, which is an initiative built to empower young women against domestic violence situations. And so we've built the platform on 3 words, which is educate, elevate, and empower. And so which one of those 3 words resonates most with you in this season of life, and why? And it doesn't have to be related to your work. It can be personal too.
Yeah. So educate, elevate, empower. Let me think for 1 second. Honestly, maybe it's because I'm an educator. In my mind, I go to education because I feel like, at least for me, in order for you to know your self-worth, whether it be academically, as a person, like you have to know it about yourself. So in my mind, I feel like that goes to education. And I don't mean necessarily like a formal education, but I mean education about like, as a person, what do I like? What works for me? So I think it's educating yourself both about yourself, educating yourself academically, educating yourself across all topics. Like you can't build anything without a foundation. And I feel like that foundation is knowledge and awareness. And so to me, I kind of associate that with education. Because I feel like I can't be empowered if I don't know my self-worth. I can't be empowered if I don't know my confidence or know that I can do it or know what I'm. So in my mind, that kind of goes like when I say education, I don't necessarily mean it formally of an academic, but educate yourself about yourself. So that's probably education. I feel like knowing just having the knowledge for whatever the topic is, I think gives you the confidence to speak on and to feel on. And then from there, you can elevate and empower.
I like that. Yeah, I always tell people when I'm throughout my pageantry journey, I've always said like knowledge is power, education is power, and that goes for anything. And so that's something I
100%.
try to do in my life too, just outside of school, even topics I have no idea. I just try to learn a little bit more about them because it just makes you more well-rounded.
Yeah, completely.
All right. Well, Dr. Ray, thank you so much for joining me today on the Her Power podcast and sharing your journey and your expertise with us. Hearing about your dedication to public health and your impact as a professional and an educator and how you've mentored people, it's really inspiring, very powerful. So thank you again for being a guest on Her Power. We loved having you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I hope I didn't talk your ear off.
Listeners, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Her Power podcast. I hope this conversation reminded you that confidence and empowerment can look a variety of different ways depending on your role and your impact. A special thank you to Dr. Ray for coming on, sharing her story, her accomplishments, and also providing some insight for us on the field of public health and what leadership looks like in her role. Until next time, remember that your voice matters, your story matters, and your power is already within you. We'll see you next time on Her Power.